My name is Kavitha Gadde, and I lead our publisher partnerships team at MoPub. I'm excited to talk to you guys today about the much anticipated results we've seen from our in-app bidding solution called Advanced Bidding. At this point, we're all pretty familiar with in-app bidding and its promise of delivering overall increased ad revenue for publishers and greater supply access for buyers. As a quick reminder, here's how MoPub's advanced bidding solution works. The publisher sends us an ad request. MoPub runs a real-time unified auction with networks and DSPs. The highest bidder wins and sends the ad content to the publisher. In this case, the network won, so the network SDK will render the ad for maximum creative expression. In a few moments, I'm going to invite a couple of our publisher partners and one of our ad network partners to join me on stage to discuss the results they've seen. But before I do that, let's actually talk about the results. MoPub's approach to running A/B tests were designed to uncover the impact of advanced bidding compared to traditional waterfall-based mediation. As it turns out, to run effective A/B tests, it takes much more than just turning bidding on. We've run several A/B tests with various publisher partners, and here are the top-line results as they relate to ARPDAU. So first, GSN experienced a 13% increase in ARPDAU, Uken Games increased by almost 5%, and PCH increased by 15%. If you want more details around what we've uncovered with our A/B test, be sure to check out our latest white paper that we just released. But for now, I'd like to invite Conrad from Uken, Brian from GSN, and Amit from Facebook to the stage. All right, well, thank you all for joining. Why don't we take a minute to have you guys introduce yourselves?
Hey guys, Conrad here from Uken Games. I head up UA and monetization at the studio, and we're a 80-person studio out based in Toronto, Canada. Hi.
My name is Brian Truman. I work with GSN Games. I'm head of ad revenue and operations there. We produce and publish several mobile games, as well as run a cable network you may be familiar with.
My name is Amit Bhojwani. I run partnerships for the Audience Network. Audience Network is one of the leading demand sources for developers here and outside.
Great. So first, let's start with either Conrad or Brian. I'm interested to know why bidding was so exciting for you guys to test. If you can tell us a little bit about that.
For me, it was two things. First is competition. It's a maybe ideological thing for me, but I love the idea of creating more competition. I think the industry benefits as a whole from this, and that was really important. And I think the promise of in-app bidding creates greater competition and fairness across all the ad networks. So that was number one. And number two is I'm always looking to not just increase ad revenue, but another key point to net income and us running our businesses to lower operational costs. So this also achieves that, right? So another thing we'll talk about is how advanced bidding will lower operational costs and allow you to actually free up your resources to do more valuable things.
Brian took both my answers. No, I'm kidding. I think for me, a big thing is the idea of like stale inventory. So just because the price that everybody called at, so your mediation calls all your network partners, or if there's a DSP, if they have a DSP, and just because the price that you got the last time the API was called doesn't necessarily mean that that's the price that each network is willing to pay now. And then also taking that idea and moving it a step further and actually per request. So I think from a competition perspective, I mean that's what mediation's predicated on, is increasing everyone's ability to access inventory and therefore drive up the cost of that inventory effectively. So just because networks see who's traditionally not that competitive in your waterfall, and maybe you have them sort of in like a backfill slot, well, in a header bidding or an advanced bidding scenario, then they have an opportunity to compete and then also access that inventory. So if that for me is like big, incremental revenue, and then also in an ideal world, less waterfall management, I think would be great, so that people on the ad monetization side can think and spend more time working with product people, thinking about how to generate more inventory from a product perspective. I think is big too.
Great. Amit, from your perspective, Facebook was actually MoPub's first ad network partner in our advanced bidding solution. So why was Facebook so gung-ho to adopt bidding so quickly?
Yeah, for us, I think it is, it's all about kind of long-term sustainable value for the publisher ecosystem. We take a very long-term view of, projects we're working on, and kind of the ethos around bidding is a key ingredient in that long-term view. Today, if you look at the publisher ecosystem, there is inefficiencies that are known, and some of them are unknown. They create a somewhat opaque and asynchronous setup, in the waterfalls that we use. And I think bidding is a good way to kind of solve some of those the issues with waterfalls today. Some of them are already mentioned here, but increased competition leads to increased monetization opportunity in the ad monetization space. And I think publishers they save time, as well as they are able to focus on the mind space and their kind of energies and resources on building their apps and creating those experiences for users, as opposed to worrying about the inefficiencies that exist today. So in that context, for us it is, we want publishers to avail of this technology. It's creating value for not only the publishers, but advertisers and users as well. And as a result, we've partnered with leading technology companies like MoPub and others. We have our own in-house bidding solution as well, and we're super excited about bidding in general.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more about the results, which is what everyone presumably cares about. So Conrad, specifically for you, how did you determine post the A/B test that it was actually working and that you're fully invested in it moving forward?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the A/B test, you guys, were a great partner helping us sort of run 2 separate waterfalls, test everything exactly the same stack. I think that was really important to anyone who's like looking to evaluate the success of something like this. Should do that and should avail themselves of that if possible. So yeah, I think our white paper 4.8% lift in revenue, which is great. I think that depending on the size of the publisher who's doing this, I think the more inventory you have, the more potential inventory you have that's that you're missing out on from a revenue perspective. So I would say that was kind of our experience. I think, anecdotally speaking, that 6% or 4.5% might actually be a little low. I think depending on like placement, whether it's interstitial or rewarded, depending how it's integrated, I think we've seen more lift. Yep. So that for us is pretty exciting. Yeah, that'd be my perspective, Brian.
Well, Brian, what's interesting about the 13% you guys saw is you actually ran the test in-house. So you didn't run an A/B test specifically with a partner. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you guys did it and why it worked?
Sure. We were able to segment our audience in such a way, at least those that the enabled group that we turned MoPub advanced bidding on, we were able to do so through our own mechanism, right? So we just split up an audience and said, okay, this percentage of the audience is going to get this waterfall ad unit from MoPub, and another group who did not have advanced bidding. So, and then we set up same thing, same waterfall on both sides. And then we ran it for quite a long time. I think, which is mentioned in the white paper, it takes a little bit of time, and Amit, you may be able to attest to this. It takes a little bit of time for that bidder to just adjust, just like any network does when you first put them in. So we let that run for I think a couple weeks, 2 weeks, before we really started making any comparisons. And then we ran it for another 2 weeks to see what the differences was, and we came to 13%. We did it on both interstitials and on reward video. And I think to Conrad's point, while results may vary, right? Any good marketer will say this. It will vary on a number of things, which I'll probably worth address, which is, one is your complexity of the waterfall today, right? So if you've already invested a lot of time and management into a waterfall, you may not see as much lift as someone who hasn't. The volume of inventory, as Conrad mentioned already, also a factor. Ad units, whether you're caching or not. One thing we haven't addressed on is that latency is another benefit, decreasing your latency. If you're not caching, like maybe you wouldn't be for banners, for example, also shows an improvement there. But one of the things that I think is important is also that you can't measure. There's a lot of unknown things. Is okay, how much time are you saving? Right, that's the another factor. So it's one thing to say, oh yeah, we all got ARPDAU lift, and I think that's reasonably to be assumed from the technology, the way it works. One other result that you see is that those who do participate, the networks, when they participate against the other networks and line items in the waterfall, end up generating a higher share of voice. Yeah. They're winning a lot more impressions. They're generally creating more revenue. Obviously, they have a competitive advantage being able to participate in dynamic pricing all the way through the waterfall. And I think that's a really important thing to note is that at this point we did it with 2 networks. Did you use all 3?
Yeah, we did 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
We only did it actually with 2 networks. And to think about how much even better it could be if we had even more networks and creating more competition, like all networks. Go ask all your networks to participate. I think it could even be better.
Great. I know you kind of touched on some of this already, but did either of you have complex waterfalls with the time saving? I'm curious to see how much time you actually really saved.
Yeah, I like to think our waterfall was decently complex, I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we definitely, I think right now, I don't know how much time savings necessarily we're at. I think you really, ideally, you have everything, a full stack, because like right now it's still like a hybrid situation where you've got some header bidding stuff and you've got some normal waterfall stuff, so you're not just gonna like leave the header bidding stuff and be like, okay, cool, keys on, walk away. So I think it's when we get to a point where everything really has that, where everything's on header bidding, that's when I think I'll feel more comfortable being like, okay, cool, let the machine run itself. So I think there's still some time investment right now, but that's one of the things that, why I really want to see like the ecosystem as a whole like move towards it, and I think that's where we need to get to.
I will just say, and this is, for transparency, which is another important factor of MoPub, so I'll stay consistent on the theme, is that I'm going to guess, because I know Conrad a little bit and I know what we tested, I would say the waterfall that we tested on specifically was not complex.
Yep.
And so that's probably why we saw a higher result. It was something where we had not put a lot of investment, and that's why I was interested. I was like, here's a segment of our population we had not invested a lot of time in optimizing our yield, so let's test it there. And I think that's probably why we saw some result difference.
Yeah, I think I would say from my perspective, when we talk to publishers about testing the solution, we actually want to test on less complex waterfalls, right? Like we want to make sure that things are working, and we want to be able to work with you to really understand that and kind of shift to the more complex waterfalls where we can actually see the results. Amit, what other results have you guys seen? So from the network perspective, outside of ARPDAU lift, what has been really important to publishers? And then even from the Facebook perspective, what has been sort of the eye-opening factor for you guys?
Yeah, so I think, on our end, just to add on to the results here, we've actually seen a variety of results, and I think you've already kind of enumerated a few variables there. There's, the ad formats that you guys work with, the demand density in the auction that the partner is offering. We looked at different regions. We've looked at complexity of waterfalls. We're actually seeing a variety of results, and in some cases, even higher ARPDAU lift than what we have in this discussion. One of the key things that we have learned is that given the different variables of everybody's business, the resources they have to dedicate to some of the testing, as we mentioned, you can actually see much greater value. We're seeing very, very exciting kind of signals from some of our publishers, not only in ARPDAU lift, but even the way they're quantifying the efficiency of the resources that they're putting into these waterfalls and their management. So hopefully we can reflect that in a metric fairly soon. Definitely the efficiency, the ARPDAU lift, and I think there are certain formats that are outperforming others, obviously given demand density.
Which ones?
So I think for publishers, it obviously depends on what kind of apps that you're running. But on our end, we're definitely seeing larger strides in rewarded video, interstitials. Those are kind of 3 formats that I think in this ecosystem is pretty big, right? For non-gaming, it might be other formats, but those 3 are definitely big for us.
Cool. So I know we talked about results in terms of ARPDAU, and you guys have mentioned some other benefits of running bidding. Would you say that CPM has become less important in terms of the way the industry is evolving?
I mean, I don't necessarily know that CPM's ever been important. I think it's ultimately like, okay, how much, like, what's the revenue? And I think CPM, from the perspective of like a good way of communicating, or like a sort of shared language of having conversations and talking with people about, oh, hey, you know, like, what's your CPM? And then like obviously the next question is, oh, cool, like, so you've got 1% fill, you know, like.
Right.
So I think that's why depending on the level of the discussion, I personally tend to say like, okay, well, like, let's just talk about, you know, from an ad ARPDAO perspective or from a overall revenue perspective, like, how are you doing? Because even like ad ARPDAO, you know, if you have somebody who's not exposing a big portion of their DAO to ads, and it's like, well, cool, you know, sure, you're going to have some like stratospheric ad ARPDAO if not that many people are seeing it, or if you have like 10,000 DAO or something.
Right.
So I think like ultimately like just kind of trying to, and I think it's also difficult. Like I think people, especially in the space, tend to want to abstract metrics because it becomes easier to have like a discussion about it. Yep. People feel like they're sharing less or something. Like you talk to a competitor and you're like, oh yeah, you know, you can try to like abstract that away a little bit, makes you feel more comfortable. I don't know. So like that's why I would say revenue is more what I would want to talk about.
So yeah, I pretty much feel the same way, so I don't know what I'll add. I'll add just a small piece, which is that it really here's where it goes away, right? So when you have the conversations today with networks, it's always a conversation about CPM because they're trying to jockey for that position in the waterfall. So you're saying like, okay, what CPM do I need to like get to move up or to get into first position? And that's where we use CPM the most today in an effective manner. And when you no longer have to do that, yes, it goes away, right? So that's one of the things that I look forward to is maybe other people, you know, enjoy this. I don't, but like talking to networks very frequently, saying how do I move up, how do I get more inventory, et cetera, right? When I no longer have to have that conversation, sure, yeah, CPM is much less important.
Yep.
You know, I was just going to add that I think, you know, in the waterfall setups today, it's like a multiplayer game, but it's single player action. It's asynchronous events where a network is talking to a publisher and the ingredients of that CPM and how they're determining it and how they want to pay you are totally asynchronous from what another network is telling you. And I think as you move to a metric like ARPDAO, you're normalizing some of the variables that you either know about or in some cases you don't know about. And I think that's what helps you save time. And you know, it kind of improves the efficiency of decision making in general. So I think CPM is a great metric historically. You know, I have tremendous respect for it. Yeah. But I think going forward, if we have to normalize the variables here, where we can, you know, have a more kind of accurate understanding of value, right. I think ARPDAO is probably you know, a good metric.
Cool.
One thing just on the you were talking about when this is like another benefit that I see from header bidding, once everybody has full header bidding waterfalls, especially like so not from the monetization perspective but from the UA perspective, like I think the worst place you want to be if you're buying traffic on like an SDK network is dragging them up the waterfall. That's kind of like the situation that I dread. So knowing that everybody can sort of access those first impressions, because call it like 1 to 3, maybe 1 to 5 first impressions are going to be the most valuable. That's what everyone's fighting over. So yeah, being in a situation where everyone can all partners can kind of access that inventory, and not having to drag people up the waterfall would be big when you're buying.
Yeah. Cool. So I assume that a lot of publishers, after hearing all these results, are going to want to start testing bidding. So from your perspective, or Brian or Conrad, or even Amit too, what are some best practices or considerations that publishers should think about if they want to start testing in-app bidding?
I think definitely making sure that your product team, like I think one of the sticking points I've had in the past from working with product, the way that we have it structured is like it's sort of slightly separate, is just like a lot of people I think run robust stack rank processes where they how much dev work is this going to generate in terms of lift for the company's metrics. And kind of going into a scenario where you have to say like, oh, there's a degree of uncertainty with what we're going to test. So I think making sure that all parties are sort of committed to testing, and like you're going to commit the dev work, and maybe you need to change a couple things and sort of iron out the details. Because I think what I would say is like don't do the test and do it poorly and then be like, it doesn't work, we're pulling it out. I think that's definitely something that's important. I think sometimes, especially for studios, publishers that are predominantly IAP and that ad revenue is like a smaller component, I think they're probably who are going to benefit the most from this. And I think they need to like commit to doing it and not just kind of like, we're going to test it, it doesn't really work, let's not. Because I think it's important to have everyone on the publishing side pushing everybody on the supply side to sort of like get this sort of industry 10 kind of moving.
Yep.
That's my perspective at least.
Yeah, I think on our end, I think we recommend that you obviously work with your technology partner to understand how their bidding solution works. We partner with key kind of companies like MoPub. We have a code of conduct where we've all signed up to a fair, an open auction, fair and transparent auction where nobody's being unfairly advantaged. So I think understanding your supply side partners' tech stack is important. I think understanding the demand density in that tech stack for the formats that you care about in the regions that you're looking to grow is a second kind of aspect of this. We talked a little bit about testing and how you measure value that you're getting from a technology like bidding. There's different types of tests that you can run. There is AB test, which is kind of more in depth. It splits traffic. It's a cleaner or more accurate way to kind of measure value from bidding. We've also done a couple of tests that we call pre-post tests, which is pre-bidding and post-bidding. Those are not necessarily as true a measure of value because there's multiple variables that could influence a waterfall. Some of them again are unknown to publishers or to networks. So I think there's a testing methodology that you can look at when you're talking to your partners. And I think overall, it's also coming down to resources that you have and optimizing the resources to what you're actually looking to get out of bidding short term and long term. So we've seen a variety of these kind of variables influence the results, but super excited.
Cool. Well, I think we're just about out of time, but I appreciate your time. We're not able to do questions now, but feel free to find any of us afterwards. I'm happy to chat. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.